In this special episode of IT Visionaries, some of the leading CIOs in the world of tech joined Ian for a roundtable discussion. At the table was Alvina Antar of Zuora, Paul Chapman of Box, and Mark Settle of Okta. Each has extensive experience in the world of tech, which leads to a lively and wide-ranging discussion of everything from dealing with vendors to dealing with the Silicon Valley echo chamber and how to deal with the politics of being a CIO. The conversation is loose, fun, and there are even a few games and surprises sprinkled in. Enjoy the episode. This podcast is sponsored by the Lightning Platform by Salesforce. Salesforce just introduced the Lightning Platform Mobile, the low-code mobile app development platform that empowers anyone to easily build, publish, and manage AI-powered mobile apps for employees and for customers. Find out more at salesforce.com/buildmobileapps.
Welcome to IT Visionaries. I'm Ian Faison, Chief Content Officer at The Mission. And I am joined by a wild group of CIOs. Mark, Alvina, and Paul, what's going on, everyone?
A whole lot. Good to be here today.
We're doing our second CIO Roundtable.
Second? When was the first?
Well, somebody missed it.
Oh, yeah.
And so you were there in spirit, though, I feel like.
I was.
So yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of different stuff today. It's going to be a meandering conversation at times, but stick with us. We have a lot of vendor conversation coming, which I feel like is fun for a lot of people who want to sell to these people. But for the IT professionals that are listening, for the CIOs, we're going to talk a lot about how to get closer to revenue, how that drives impact, which ultimately helps your career in all things, why feedback is a gift, and how to build those relationships with your CIO peers. So let's get into it. First question, I'm going to go to Alvina first.
Yes. Ladies first.
Yeah, ladies first. That's right. What's your favorite vendor story? Like, do you have a favorite kind of way that you were approached or conversation or that was struck up that was the best thing that you have seen to date?
Well, I guess I could recall the discussion with the CEO at Zoom. I remember I had just a year prior had purchased Blue Jeans to run our first video conferencing solution and our first video conferencing deployment at Zuora, and met Eric and listened to his vision and how he had spent years building the product and not even thinking about selling until the product was perfected and until the product was positioned to be able to deploy enterprise-wide, and learning how they differentiated themselves directly from the CEO was really powerful. And, you know, we've had huge success globally using video conferencing across 1,300 employees. It was difficult to switch, but it was worth it. And just the outreach directly from Eric, and then the relationship that I've had with the CIO there, Harry Mosley, and their whole team has been nothing but professional and extremely supportive.
You know, at the other end of the spectrum, I'm not in my current position, but in past positions, I had a storage vendor, and you spend a lot of money on storage typically, especially in a large enterprise, and it's a recurring cost over time. And the one thing I had a great relationship with this vendor. In fact, I had a great relationship with this vendor on 3 different jobs with 3 different companies. And one of the things that I always really valued about their approach to selling to me was they had a very strategic, multi-quarter, multi-year kind of perspective. So they would look at my storage needs. They had multiple product lines. They were trying to optimize the mix of their capabilities to my particular needs. And they would never come in at the end of the quarter with like the deal of the century. Like, if you'll buy this in the next week, I can come up with some intergalactic pricing for you that will, this will be the best deal you've ever had in your entire. That was just not their approach whatsoever. They really wanted to be very strategic, and I always felt like they were really helping me be strategic in the way I thought about storage.
Isn't that an interesting thing? Like we always talk about different podcasts, but I think it's super relevant here about, buying or selling when people want to buy, right? It's crazy to me that so many people push their agenda onto the person buying. It's like, I have enough freaking problems on my own side. I don't need your problems coming into my life too. It's like a good relationship, right? It's like, I have my own baggage. Like, I know you're going to bring yours too, but if off Jump Street, you're going to say, you have to buy this by this day and you're going to get a great discount, it's like probably not the best idea.
I don't want to preempt Paul. I had a sales rep once who told me about the college expenses for his kids that he was trying to solve to, and why selling me in that quarter was very important to his kids' education. I mean, that sounds kind of comic and trite, like nobody would ever do that, but people actually do that.
That is wild.
Yeah,
that is too personal.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you say vendor, because I always think when you say vendor, it just
feels wrong.
It feels like a very sort of transactional sort of type of experience, and it's sort of like friendships. You don't have a lot of time for a lot of friends, but the time you have for the friends you have a lot of time for them. And I think when you're partnering and building relationship, back to Mark's point, there's something that's mutually beneficial in the relationship. And I found that without sort of naming specific sort of vendors or partners or over the years, I think the ones that stand out are the ones that have really turned into mutually beneficial, like your experience with Eric, right? You're appreciative, you're learning, there's something that he's bringing into the conversation. And so for me, you want to be associated with companies that are forward thinking and innovative and in bringing something that's mutually beneficial to the at the end of the day, there's some transaction in there as well. But yeah, those are the things that I've found over the years to be the most beneficial.
Is it weird to be a CIO that also is selling to CIOs? I mean, I think all three of you are in the same boat here, but is it something where you're kind of all in it together so you can be a little bit more transparent with each other? Or is it something that feels adversarial? Or, I mean, what was that kind of like?
I mean, it could be adversarial if you're CIOs of competing companies, potentially. If you are working for companies that compete with each other, then that's potentially the case.
But you're not a sales guy. So even then.
And so, but I think the real value in this regard comes from the fact that there's perspective that you have around the position that the other person is in. And we know the complexities of the role. We know the challenges of the role. We're often dealing with the same type challenges and complexities as one another. We're at different cycles of where we are in our companies, whether we're growing or under cost pressures or headwinds, whatever it might be. And I think the professional chemistry, CIO to CIO, is very important because you can relate. A salesperson can't necessarily relate in the fact that they haven't actually sat in your in your seat.
It's also that transparency, right? It's really being able to have a real conversation around what's working, what's not, and being open and transparent. I mean, you're ultimately not trying to sell. If you are, you're in the wrong position, right? You're ultimately an expert in the product as a CIO, in the product that you sell. And your peers look to you to provide guidance and best practices and be able to ensure that what they do, when they do commit, or if they are already committed, that they're able to use the technology in the best way and leverage the relationship to be able to ensure that the investment is real and that it's fulfilled.
So what does that conversation feel like when you're talking to a CIO, a fellow CIO, or maybe you haven't talked to them about it at all, and you say, you know what, we got to switch. Like, product isn't good enough. Like, is that conversation something where the best ones take it back to their product team and say, hey, this is actionable feedback?
I think that happens, yeah. I mean, I think we all know where the boundaries are in these conversations. Because again, I think Alvina said, we're not salespeople at the end of the day. We're not trying to close a deal. That's not our job. And we can be pretty honest with each other. There's a brotherhood or sisterhood of CIOs, and you're probably going to get more direct feedback and more unvarnished feedback about why the decision was ultimately made. Sometimes it's a cost decision. and it has absolutely nothing to do with the features, functions, or capabilities of the product. And Lord knows, as CIOs, we've all been under cost pressures, and so we understand that. We understand why people have to trade off cost against maybe a best-of-breed solution or whatever. So I think, bringing that kind of feedback back into the organization is very important. And I forget who came up with this phrase that's been around for a long time, the idea of the voice of the customer. We're all fairly small companies growing at rapid rates. And the larger you get, the more the voice of the customer kind of gets lost into the political agendas and personal aspirations of all the major players in a large company. And we've also been in large companies. We know what that's like. And so whether you like it or not, it has nothing to do with intent, but large companies have inherent bureaucracies that slow down decision making and actually are almost designed to push out the voice of the customer, because they presume they know what the customer needs, and they will do what the customer needs. And so particularly in our kind of situation where we're working with companies that sell products to other CIOs, there's almost an obligation on us to go the extra mile or force people to listen to some uncomfortable feedback that they're not going to get through other channels, and be truth tellers, at the end of the day, about why things are not gaining traction in the marketplace.
I'm a big believer in wisdom of the community, and wisdom of the CIO community is a great one. Anytime we can get together and hang out and collaborate and share with one another, we learn stuff, right? Just in the nature of our conversations, and that feedback that we're then able to bring back to our organizations is really valuable. And as a CIO, you're always looking to see how you can bring value to your organization.
Especially as you talk about the voice of the customer. The reality is, as SaaS companies, that is even paramount, right? I mean, it is one thing to sell once and ship a product, but ultimately we're selling SaaS solutions that are recurring solutions that if your customer isn't happy, they're not going to stay. They're not going to stick around. They're not going to continue to renew. And so that voice is critical for the business. It not only creates noise in the market when a customer churns, but it also impacts new business, right? And so that voice of the customer, the perspective, is what should drive product strategy. And yes, larger companies tend to push the voice because it creates distraction, right? They've got a product strategy that's a year or plus long, and that strategy doesn't want to get distracted. And ultimately, I look to us as CIOs to provide that perspective and ensure that the strategy aligns to the biggest pain points or the biggest areas of opportunity that the CIO community is looking for from our products.
If there are other folks that are going to listen to this that also come from our community of vendors, one of the things that we don't get asked to do a whole lot is to call people who have selected another product at the end of the process. So we'll get many calls from members of our sales team that are down into the final stages of trying to close a deal, and they would like us to reach out and contact our peers at the prospective customer.
You're talking about people that are within your
the sales. Yeah.
Your sales team.
We've got a deal coming up, and can you reach out and talk to this individual or whatever. And this is a hard thing to do, but again, for folks that are listening, I would counsel them to consider this. You've lost the deal. Okay, you've lost the deal. Call the other CIO, thank them for the consideration that they gave to your product, if it was an earnest consideration, and just let them know that you're there if it doesn't turn out. And especially with large enterprises, and I'm interested in both Alvina's and Paul's perspective on this. What's funny is enterprise sales are long-term relationship building and sustenance kind of exercises. This isn't like a business where you've got a huge list of 3,000 prospects that you're going to go through in the quarter and try to sign up 20% of them or something. Yeah. And the sales cycle, you go up through the Fortune 500 ranks. By the time you get to a Fortune 100 company, a sales cycle could be 18 months. Easily 18 months, right? And maybe they choose the wrong product, which is not my product. I mean, they choose some competitor product. It's important to let them know that you're there for them if they run into problems. And it's not there's sour grapes on our end, or we never want to talk to you again.
Or to really understand why.
And to understand why, and to bring that feedback back.
To bring that feedback, to understand why.
But there's a very professional way to say thank you for the consideration. We're here for you if we can help sometime in the future, and let's be friends, even though.
I think it's multidimensional. I think there's pre, right? There's, we're opening up discussions. Is there anything I can do to help, right? As CIO to CIO, I think that's valuable, right? We talked earlier about the wisdom of the community and the valued feedback. There's post-sale, right? Is there anything I can do to help you once that sale happens, right? Or we're moving forward for implementation or what have you. We've all leaned on each other in the past for that type of thing. And then there's potential, the churn. Someone is not getting the value that they expected from your service, and so they're looking to move away. And then there's maybe back to Mark's point, did not get the deal you expected, the win, and why. And so I think it's multidimensional the way the CIO can add value to those conversations.
But I think one piece as I listen to this is, it's that fine balance, right? Yes, you want to be engaged at all dimensions, but there's this balance, right? You don't want to appear that you're just another salesperson and that you're literally not focusing on your business, which is the internal technology organization that you're running to run your business. It's ensuring that you've got balance and ensuring that even when you do reach out, it's with an authentic, genuine, message, right? And then it's not that the goal is to drive yet a different message than what sales is saying from a CIO title, right? But that it's genuine, peer to peer.
And I mean, I think sometimes, especially here in the Valley, we get a little bit of echo chambery at times.
Echo chambery.
Yeah, that's
you
close enough.
You can do better than that. Come on, yeah.
Close. Here in the Valley, we have a bit of an echo chamber. And I think that works in a really good way because we're open to trying new things and to innovation and to hearing each other out, and we're collaborative and all this stuff. But the other side of that is there's a group of people who, are being sold to or selling into who just don't feel that way. How do you look at those type of relationships and building those? Because the skeptic, the prospect who's these, and we have listeners all over the world. I think it's 140 countries listen to IT Visionaries. No big deal. Thanks to everyone out there. We love you.
Congratulations.
And thanks to all of you. It's great CIOs. Alvina, how do you talk to those folks? How do you talk to the folks who are sitting there and they're like, man, I would love to get just an ounce of that type of engagement. I would love to get a meeting with my CIO a meeting with my CEO once a week. I would love to get, just a fraction of the type of top level buy-in that you have. I don't have that. So how do I make a difference? How do I make a change in my organization when I have, a fifth of the budget and a lot less of the airtime?
Make it happen. This is not 1990. It's a new age. And ultimately, everyone's talking about digital transformation and business transformation. Who drives that? The internal technology organization drives the business to transform. And so stop making excuses and get in front of the leadership and ensure that they understand. And actually, don't just get in front and make noise. Have a plan, have a vision, have a strategy on what is needed to drive the business forward and what you can do as a technology leader to support that strategy.
And how do they get closer to revenue? How can you make that case by saying, I understand the business and I'm going to make the business case for why I need to do more?
It's interesting. I think that what Alvina says is absolutely right. I mean, you've got to, there's a book on being, sort of fearless in that regard. But at the same time, I also believe that careers are long, careers are short, depending on how you sort of define that. And you want to be doing meaningful work for a meaningful company. And at the end of the day, if you find that you're in a company that is no longer meaningful, or the work you're doing is no longer meaningful, and there's no path to changing that, then go somewhere else. Don't run away from something. You always want to be running towards something, but
well, that is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. Change. No, not run away. It's you want to, because where you go could be worse. You want to be running towards something, right. Something that, hopefully is going to drive you toward meaningful work for a meaningful company. And I think it sort of comes back to what we said earlier as well. Part of the value we get in our, or certainly I get, and be interested to hear from Mark and Alvina on this as well, is that Someone told me many years ago that, in order to build your career, you want to get more externally connected with the professional community, because you can learn so much from that community. And just the interactions that I have with prospective customers, with my fellow CIO friends, family, whatever, just the value of the information and feedback that you get is just, we all have hints, tips, and tricks, right? And we all value one another's opinion. I think that, you're absolutely right. But at the same time, if you're not doing meaningful work for a meaningful company, maybe you should go somewhere else.
I mean, I was talking to a CIO, not on the podcast, that their company was over 100 years old, and they basically said that they're like, what you all have in the Valley, I don't, and it's a multinational company. They're like, I don't have this.
So, so I imagine there are people listening to this who say to themselves, when we have the voice of the customer, wait a minute, you want me to wander around the power structure in my company and complain about things that we do that people don't like, and I can't even get a 3% increase in my budget, or they won't even let me, So why would I'm struggling so much now to have a seat at the table, to have a voice, to justify the things that I can see that are right in front of my nose that I need to do. So for those people, I would say, the voice of the customer isn't just some other responsibility. It's a source of power. Like, you look at the head of revenue. If the head of revenue comes back from a sales trip to the East Coast and wants to have 10 minutes with the CEO or 15 minutes with the CEO, the guy juggles his schedule to get him in here. I want to find out what he found on that trip. So, I mean, if you come back in and say, gee, I visited 3 of our top 20 customers about how the UPS service was doing, about we're at UPS and what they like and don't like about our systems, and how the information and insight they have and how we're helping them automate things, et cetera, et cetera. Oh my God, suddenly let's have that conversation. If you say, I want to get on your calendar to talk about how if we had a new application, I think I could shave maybe 10 minutes off the quarterly close, or, we might be able to improve our order management transaction efficiency by 5%. They're not going to clear their calendars for that conversation at all. So my point being here, in a long-winded way, folks that are struggling for the seat at the table, you asked the question, Ian, think about ways that you have a more direct line to the customers, and you can bring their perspective back into the organization, because there's a huge thirst for that, and it may be a latent thirst. They may not even know that they want to hear the story until they get told the story. Yeah. So I have I should probably set the stage here. So we're sitting in the studio in Palo Alto.
Yes.
And you're hearing sliding, almost like children are putting index cards all over the table. I'm seeing what it sounds like. I'm just saying it sounds as if that was happening. But so Mark made index cards that say, we'll take a photo, we'll post this in the show notes, and we'll tweet it out. So it says BS on one card. And so you're allowed to put the BS card up if you think one of the guests.
I already used that.
Yes, that's what we all laughed. So there's a BS card. What's WJAM again?
Wait just a minute.
Oh, wait just a minute. So is that like you want to interject?
Something like that.
It's like an interjection. And then there's a IMHO, in my humble opinion, which I feel like, Mark, you have a lot of humble opinions.
No, Paul would say, I've never had a humble opinion.
That's right.
I agree. Just take out it's just IMO.
Yeah.
Humble, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, right.
But I wanted to add something about voice of the customer, because this is so interesting.
Yep.
The reality is, you can reiterate what your customer tells you all day long. But if you're not an expert in your product, I mean, it's just not going to hold credibility in any shape or form. And so you have to build not just yourself, but your organization needs to invest and build expertise in your own product, and then reach out and get input from the customers.
If you can. I mean, there's that's not a universally possible thing.
It isn't.
The insight, one of the great guests that we had on, Juan Perez, the CIO at UPS, who's coming on in the next few episodes as well. So he was saying, basically, he did this deep dive into UPS and what they were doing. And he found out that if they save 1 mile per driver per day, that it saves UPS $50 million a year. And so he was just like, this is what if I figure out a solution to 1 mile a day, it's like I can go to leadership and save, again, $500 million over the next decade. And so he did all this analysis, and he instituted this stuff, and they have, some algorithms that are looking stuff. And then he took that solution to leadership and like, hey, here's $50 million a year more that you can have back. And it's like, that's the way you do it, right? Like that's the way that you show that you're next to the revenue.
But he had to build expertise in the way that the entire end-to-end flow and process was being executed and finding opportunities to optimize to be able to come to that.
And then the solution was, hey, we need to build what they called Orion, which is the on-road integrated optimization navigation system.
Optimize.
Short name, right? It's a classic IT name.
Is there an acronym?
Orion.
Orion.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
come on, he's
okay.
And so, so he said, hey, I can save $50 million a year. It's like, okay, yeah. It's like your sales analogy, right? The chief revenue officer comes back from I don't know, did you say Miami, New York?
East Coast.
The East Coast,
Close
yeah.
enough.
Hey, I found a way that we can save $50 million. You're going to get the conversation. You're going to get the meeting, right? And then the next thing was, hey, we can save $50 million euros over the next decade. Here's the investment. We need to build this thing that we want. And then, well, how much does that cost, right? But at least you are starting at a point of some level of, instead of saying, I need more budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need 3% more. Like for what?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add one small
Please do.
piece to this, and that is, you said about being an expert in your own product. You have to believe in that. You have to be an evangelist of your own capabilities. Otherwise, you shouldn't be there yourself, right? If you don't believe in the value that you can bring, I don't know, that to me will come through in any conversation, right? We're all very good at sniffing out sort of, the BS meter, right? And if you don't truly believe in the value that you can bring through your own services,
Then who else will?
Then who else will, right? Because one other thing I said, like at Box, certainly in the last couple of years, the three most requested presenters or speakers in our executive briefing center have been our chief compliance officer, our chief information security officer, and the CIO.
Nice.
Right? If, you think about
CIO is a good looking guy.
yeah.
Who doesn't want to?
No, but you think about, the importance of risk and security and compliance and regulation and things like that. And then you think about, how does this work in the real world? Tell me, CIO, how does this work in the real world? And that's the reason why.
The other interesting thing that I've discovered, and I've done this in places other than Okta, when you have a product, in many cases, the customers will find ways of using it that you never intended. So I think
true.
some people believe that they predefine the use cases for their technology, and then all you have to do is go out and pound it into the prospect base. Like if you're, I'm going to go off on a jag here, but if you're too stupid to not understand like why this is good for you, I'm going to explain why it's good for you. Because if you use it this way, you can do these things. Like that's what you want. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to a customer and I've watched how they've used a product. This is really a pre-Okta observation. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, why don't we do that? Like that is a really smart thing to do. We should be using the product to try to do something like that. And so I've had many situations where sales reps, they're very differential to, I think, all of us, and they don't want to waste our time, et cetera. And so they're very apologetic about, gee, if I could just, have you for a couple of days in Cincinnati, or if you'd be willing to fly out and like chat to some people, as if it's a complete waste of our time in a sense. Like we have more important things to do back at the corporation, but gee, if you could just help out, that would be great. And I found many times I go out and I learn so much by what the customers are doing with what we're selling, that I come back and either want to institute it internally within our company itself, or I run right over to the product marketing guys and say, we should be talking about this use case. I mean, this is like really economically significant.
Same here. The use cases are almost boundless. I don't know what I don't know in terms of the use cases, and I learned so much from listening to customers and how they're using the platform.
With all deference to our marketing colleagues, I mean, they really do kind of get on message about like how you're supposed to use the product, and they just want to like flail the prospect base incessantly with like, here's a benefit. Why aren't you doing it the way we want you to do it? And with all due respect, they're not IT professionals. They don't understand how these tools are actually used in practice in many cases.
I mean, the biggest thing that I say is, if you don't really understand the business's problems, right? I mean, like, you mentioned, don't just provide more problems and try to sell solutions with new problems that people aren't even thinking about because they've got 15 other priorities. At this stage, we need to be in a position where we understand the pain points of the customer or of the prospect, and we understand in depth what is needed to be able to support their initiatives, right? Whether it's a growth initiative, whether it's a cost savings initiative, whatever it is, like we need to understand that at a level that'll allow for a real conversation as opposed to a generic conversation around buying your product. Like if you sit and get the knowledge of the prospect that you're pursuing in terms of what are their struggles, what are the things that they're, if you think about, some of the initiatives that we deal with is not just deploying one solution, it's an end-to-end quote to cash solution or quote to revenue solution that encompasses 10 different solutions, to ultimately get to a full base product. And the reality is, unless you really understand the overall initiative, you can't provide real recommendations, and you can't go in clearly providing a solution unless there's clarity around the overall directive.
Well, I mean, that's one of those things about consultative selling and some of these kind of ideas that they kind of get thrown around a little bit of like, man, do the damn work for me. Like, that's the thing that I always come back to is like, don't just go do the work tell me what my peers are doing. Like, that's one of those things where it's like, everybody always wants to know, like, how is a similar company using your product? And it's like, how they're using my product is like moderately interesting, but like, what bullet point on their slide did you remove that they no longer have to worry about, right? And I think it goes back to this idea of what we mentioned in the pre-show. Maybe someday we'll record the pre-show, that a phrase came up a few times, GBE, good but expensive, and how there's some CIO pockets. There's people talking behind the scenes, the old word of mouth that nobody ever wants to talk about, is saying, man, that product is good, but it's expensive. What are those conversations that happen behind closed doors?
Or CIO therapy dinners.
or CIO therapy dinners.
Well, it depends on how you define expensive as well, right? I mean, there's a comparative thing, right? So you think about value and, the sort of traditional sort of models around investment are much more tightly tied to sort of hard ROI and TCO. And, if we're going to invest $1, we want at least a dollar return, whether that's some cost takeout or whatever it might be. And I think that disruption today is showing that speed is an ROI.
Yeah.
And productivity and efficiency and agility. And these things are very hard to quantify from a financial traditional sort of ROI perspective. So when we say expensive, yeah, there's a sort of, there's like potentially this net new, there's cost takeout as well. It sort of maybe some of the lower end transactional use cases, but as you get into more sophisticated capabilities, it's about speed and agility and the give back of time. And I think that gets trickier. I think it's harder to quantify those types of investments. And that is typically where we say that's expensive, is when we struggle with real sort of
value.
Quantifiable value or ROI.
You pay for what you get. Right.
So what are those what is value? Like, what is value? What are some of those things that you find valuable?
So I think Paul and I have had this conversation a couple times recently. So I think there's a nuance to this. You kind of have to separate systems of record versus system of engagement.
Yeah.
Systems of record are the way you are, from an auditable standpoint, running the company and reporting your financial results and maybe some of the harder measures about what's going on. Systems of engagement is exactly what Paul said. So here's how I think about it. In the old days, our standard CIO playbook was standardization and cost savings. Like, oh my God, like we can't let there be anything in here that overlaps by more than 20%. And if it does, then we have to pick the best of the two and go say, I'm sorry to somebody and like take it away from them or like not let them have that or whatever. On the system of engagement side, human capital is so important in the modern corporation. I mean, the war for talent is just out there. I think you were saying before, Ian, there's 7 million open jobs according to LinkedIn in the country. I don't know how many of those are like tech jobs, So here's how I think about it. To go to the CFO and say, gee, I could save us $1 million, or I could save us $500,000 if we just got rid of a competitor to Slack or whatever. I mean, really, at the end of the day, if you look at the labor costs in the company, they're so high. If it makes 5 people more productive to have a second tool that competes with Slack, have at it. You know, like kind of go
That's
for it.
interesting.
Type of thing.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So cost is like the way
But it's all based on value.
we're all conditioned to think about that. So I'm going to repeat what Paul said. So in my mind,
Don't.
no, Paul was right for once. You know, so I'm just trying to throw him a bone here. Okay. So productivity trumps cost. Productivity trumps cost. Speed of the business trumps productivity.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, security trumps everything below. So there may be reasons why we have to intervene and say, yeah, that's really, I understand how that helps you run like field marketing better, but you can't do that, you know, because you can't do that. And we get put in the policeman role. This is the thing. Now, here we could have a whole separate conversation about this. So, you know, the security organizations develop the policies, and we become like the enforcers of the policy.
Yeah, that's
so they kind of like
interesting.
sit behind. They say, well, here's what you have to. This is what we're going to claim that we're going to commit to doing as a company to stay safe. The board says those are great policies. We really need to have those policies. Now we have to have controls that actually enforce the policies that IT will go off and maintain across the company, and then we kind of show up on people's doorstep and say you can't do that. And it's like IT, like you can't do that.
The bad guys.
It's why I said earlier the three most requested presenters. It's not because people really want to enjoy hanging out with the security and compliance folks. You know, they're great at what they do, but they're not always the most exciting folks to hang out with. Is because if you cannot remove objection around the risk, the trust, the compliance, the regulatory, then the rest of it doesn't matter. So, you know, that's why, you know, you meet and remove those objections up front, and then you can get to the other value add.
Shout out to all of our security and compliance friends. We love you.
We do.
We're just being, you know, being fair,
Yeah.
being transparent.
They make us better.
I think it's a really interesting point, and you might win the Audiogram Award because that's a pretty good soundbite.
Oh my gosh.
That you might get the trailer on the Twitters because that was pretty good.
There's your challenge, Paul, right there.
Yeah, right. And I want to go back to the idea of how ideas are presented to you and how you present ideas to other CIOs with regards to how other organizations are selling products. You know, this kind of vendor thing that you were talking about, which I agree. Vendors could we have a more dirty word? Like vendor is it's horrific.
Yeah,
it's really.
I used to say it. So when I think of vendor, it's like someone who's got one hand in my pocket and one hand around my throat, right? Especially when it comes to upsell or renewal, that's a vendor, right?
Okay, that one might be the
I
audiogram.
know, man. That took literally a second.
So you set up.
That
You set
took
the challenge.
literally a second, and there you went.
You made me think. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think of vending machine. I think of just like, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm one of the candy bars in the vending machine that, you know, you're like, it's $1.35 to get a Snickers. I think that there's an interesting idea of we all have so little time, and sales process and decision making is a huge part of that, right? It's like kind of like talent, like with hiring, it's like hiring is so freaking hard that it's like you have to spend a lot of time to do it right. Well, it's the same thing with selecting vendors. At times, you have this thing where there's really good companies that are really, really good at sales and marketing and have a product that maybe it's equal, maybe it's not equal, maybe it's whatever. How do you all do like vendor discovery and vendor vetting? Like, you know, I don't know if you're doing bake-offs, I don't know if you're doing other sorts of things, but it seems like the selection of technology for CIO is so critical and so much thought goes into it. I'm curious to peek under the hood and see how you all are doing it.
So again, I go back to the systems of record versus engagement. So I think, and think about this as like a roll of the dice, right? So systems of record tend to be more monolithic. You're going to spend more money. You're probably going to live with them for a longer period of time. So you want a more formal kind of structured process. And, you know, what you don't want are your finance people calling around asking the controllers of other companies, like, which of the ERPs do you like better?
I challenge that. And systems of record should not be monolithic at this day and age.
Well, yes, but there needs to be more formal evaluation against requirements. You can't kind of go on a whim and say, you know, this is the way we're going to run financials versus this because I made 3 calls to whatever. A system of engagement, on the other hand, you can really use social tools to get a lot of feedback about what's working in other companies. And it's, in my experience, particularly recently, it's a much less formal process. And you can tolerate duplication of capability. So if one group wants to use Slack and another group wants to use HipChat and somebody else has bought Ring Central and they have their own kind of texting and messaging capability, Quip, and in some kind of a department or function or team that really promotes their productivity, then for the CIO to intervene and say, no, enterprise-wide, I have one tool. Everybody will use my one tool. That's what we're going to do. It doesn't work. I mean, it's not achievable. And you go back to the human capital that you're trying to maximize. Why compromise the productivity of a 200-person organization to save $250,000 or some sum of money, depending on the size?
I think Mark
company?
makes a really good point. I think we do have to, when we have these conversations, do have to separate out sort of church and state, and that is, the systems that run our business processes, sort of the financial systems and the HR systems and so on, versus the systems of
the state.
The state. You can divide it each way you.
And who's the
decide
church?
I'm not going to decide which one's on which side of that line, but versus systems of engagement. And interestingly, systems of engagement. It's quite funny. I often refer to this as sort of like the anthropology approach. It's like Jane Goodall. It's like, watch what's going on inside your organization, right? You're gonna see. When I first arrived at Box, I asked the question, why don't we use Slack? And it's a rhetorical question. The real question is how many users do we have? Whether it's sanctioned or not sanctioned, these are systems of engagement sort of make their way into an organization in a very sort of organic way. And you can, what you can learn from that is these are the systems that the organization is naturally adopting and gravitating towards. And you don't have to then sort of go off and do the RFP and come back and say, it's this one. You actually have the data inside your organization.
Yeah, listen to the organization. Don't be opposed to it.
And here's what I found over the years as well. It turns out that the choice of one is not enough. The choice of three is normally too many, and the organization naturally lands on two when it comes to systems of engagement. So I'm not a math wizard, but I know that greater than one and less than three.
We got a BS card being called here.
It's pink.
So I got to jump in here. We should have a follow-on around CIO fantasies. I'm
Fantasies.
in.
So one of my
We go from getting
fantasies.
fired to fantasies.
No, this is way farther up. So we all have business systems analysts. So a business system analyst usually has in-depth knowledge of a particular platform, and it could be NetSuite or Workday or Box or whatever.
Yeah.
And they kind of can think about how to configure those different tools to satisfy different use cases within the company. And all of us participate in many conversations about what's happening in the modern IT organization and the modern corporation. And there's all these collaboration and productivity tools that kind of float around. And to Paul's point about the anthropologists, one of my fantasies is to hire a couple of master or PhD anthropologists, turn them loose within the company, and just study how collaboration actually takes place. And it goes to the point, IT has no way of providing coaching or guidance about how you should use Slack or what the combination would be. I'm going to share a story. I called Gartner, this is a couple of years ago. And so I called Gartner.
I had an analyst question too, so this is funny. I'm glad you're bringing this up.
And I said, okay, say there's 1,000 people. Okay, so say 1,000 people come to work every day in Kansas City, and they go to an office park in the suburbs, and they all park their cars, they go into work, and they collaborate in a standard office park. Okay, same 1,000 people. Now you got 500 people in Charlotte, North Carolina, and 500 people in Portland, Oregon, doing the same work. I mean, it's the same company or whatever. And how should they collaborate? Now say that there's 300 people in Paris, and there's 400 people in San Francisco, and there's 300 people in Jakarta or Hong Kong or whatever. So what would be the right combination of collaboration tools in those three different scenarios? It's the same 1,000 people. They have the same work to do, but it can't possibly be that the collaboration tools would be the same to get the work done. So what would you, Gartner, propose? So the answer was, we have no idea how to answer that question, but if you want to know the best video conferencing tool or the best file sharing tool or whatever, we can absolutely talk to you about that. But nobody really looks at how people work. They don't. We really don't know how people work, and we're not in a position to recommend. And again, my experience has been the leader has such a huge impact. If the leader loves voicemail, everybody does voicemail. If the leader loves email, everybody does email. If the leader does Slack, everybody does Slack. Not because it's the best tool or the right tool, because the leader is most comfortable with that. So you can have different functional groups that go off on these completely diametrically opposed tangents in terms of the tools that they use because that's the preference of the leader of the
Yeah,
organization.
it's very true. And you have time zones, language challenges. That's why there is no single tool that says this is the one.
But it must be more scientific, like to your point about Jane Goodall. I mean, if we could go study monkeys, how they build societies, we should be able to look at.
There absolutely is, and then you could end up with regional and cross-regional. I actually think that studying what is going on, and there's plenty of tools today that allow us to study what goes on underneath the covers. The challenge is you don't want to have sort of too many unsanctioned tools for too long because it creates a certain amount of risk. But what you do get is insights and visibility into what the organization is just naturally adopting and using. And when you then sanction, that's a great win for the CIO because you're sanctioning what the organization is already telling you they want.
Just there are consulting groups that come in, and I don't know what feeds they use, but they look at communication that happens in the company at a personal level, like who I email interact with and almost inevitably, the clusters of communication that happen look completely different than the org chart of the company.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And if you look at like the top 20 influencers in the company and you bring them up to the executive team, nobody's ever heard of these people at all. Yeah. They have no idea who they are, but their influence network in the company is more pervasive than the CEO.
They're socially connected. They're participative. It's almost like
they're admired as opinion leaders. They're
It's like
valued.
the Discovery Channel for IT or something. I don't know.
So Jane Goodall. I'm going back for my anthropology degree after this conversation.
And that's worth what you paid for it, by the way. You can keep that one.
So it's funny. Right. But isn't this the funny thing, right? Is like we have an IT podcast with three CIOs sitting in the studio and we're talking about anthropology, right? Like this is the state of the IT leader, right? Is like we need to figure out how humans work best together. That is like a primary use case for why IT is important. Like, how crazy is that?
And it's not point solutions, right?
No,
I mean, it's much bigger than that. And no one's thinking about that holistically.
You know, I actually, shameless self-plug, but that's not really what I meant it to be, but I'll say it anyway. I actually just wrote a blog that I titled VP of Workplace Productivity.
Paul wrote a blog.
I wrote a blog.
Here we go.
I found some time on some plane somewhere or stuck in some airport somewhere where I crafted this blog. But the point there, though, was that it wasn't about IT. It was about the culture of your organization, how you're, even Mark, to your point, not just geographically how organization is broken up, but just the sort of demographic of the organization, millennials, Gen Y, Gen Z, whatever it might be, different ways of working, your culture, its open, social, collaborative nature versus sort of more sort of traditional. And the reason I mentioned it is that what I was referring to in this blog was that you have to bring together not only technology, but the culture of your organization, how you're demographic and how you're geographically laid out, and then also the facilities with which you provide. Work used to be this place you went to. It's much more of a state of mind today, right? So you have to bring together workplace, the culture of your organization, and then technology as well. It's like, why does one technology work at one place? Which is why I think the Gartner challenge is always, we recommend using this. It's like, well, yeah, that works at those organizations, but not at mine. And so I think that there is sort of almost this role that emerges. Maybe that is it. It's the VP of Workplace Productivity or whatever it is.
Collaboration.
Rather than Jane Goodall, it's like, maybe it's the VP of anthropology, IT anthropology or something. Yeah, that sounds boring. I think the VP of IT anthropology or technology anthropology sounds better.
Anthropology within IT.
I mean, I'm here for it. Next time, let me know when you're writing the blog post, man. We'll link it up in IT Visionaries communities.
All right.
We'll get it out there.
It's on LinkedIn. Take a look.
All right. Yeah, we'll find it on LinkedIn. Our producer will run it down. We'll put it in the show notes. So, it's funny that you say that. I was talking to a company, big Silicon Valley company, one of the unicorn pre-IPO companies. It was like employee, 45 or something like that. And he has a very strange role. It's like nothing you would ever think is somebody that, would be like, and he's not a C-level executive, nothing like that. And I was talking to somebody who is a C-level at this company, and they're saying, they're like, when he talks at a meeting, like everybody shuts up and listens. He's like senior director of a very specific niche. And it's like, a mix of that kind of longevity, but also just like understanding, like doesn't talk a lot, but when he does. And I think it goes to that kind of like workplace performance thing where if you have people in your organization that need to be empowered with that sort of stuff, like if he wants to choose a specific system for communication that he wants on his team, like let that guy have it, right? Like we don't need to sit there and like fight tooth and nail about why you need to be using whatever it is. Do you find that the internal, like, you know, politics of being a CIO is such that you need to make sure that those people are satiated in some way, that they're getting attention in some way, that they're getting the things that they need? Or is it kind of this decentralized kind of nature where it's like you just want people to be productive?
I don't know. I mean, the word politics makes me cringe. So nobody has time for politics. Not at our growth and scale. That's for sure. And I don't think that at any position within the organization, I feel like politics just ultimately slows down the company. Seriously.
We got two BSs. Two BSs called on
Who
you.
has time for politics?
No, but here's the problem. I mean, anytime two human beings come together to try to do something, they're politics, and we could all reflect on our marriages, but that would be another conversation separately. But
my marriage is not political at all.
No, you're always right, and your husband's always right.
There you go. No, but I'm serious. It's just the level of politics and the alignment around shared objectives, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But there's always, I mean, we spend so much of our time in CIO jobs just socializing information. It's not a technical job. It is a political job. Well, not in my current role, but I had a job several years ago. I felt like I was Henry Kissinger during the Arab-Israeli, like I would just try to like talk
topical reference for our listeners.
I would try to go around to different C-level executives and just get them to agree on this IT modernization project. Yeah. And they were like, we had P&Ls in different geographies. So there was like the head of the Asia Pac operation, the head of EMEA, and the head of North America, and the head of Canada, and whatever. And I needed money from all of them. And I was like on this, I stopped doing any technical work whatsoever. All I did was fly around to the heads of the different P&L groups and understand why they didn't like the ideas that we were proposing and how I had to modify my plan to keep them happy, you know, et cetera. I mean, that was a big organization that was different than the one I'm involved in now. But no, I think you get two people together, there's politics. There's no apolitical organization.
Yeah, I think I'd add that the thing that we have to be careful of is the sort of the notion of squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And
yeah, totally.
You do have people
point.
in an organization that are constant sort of complainers about the same thing over and over again. And if you're not careful, you end up spending too much of your time or think too much of your time on sort of minority versus majority. You know, I've seen it where someone will say, like, I think the conference room experience sucks. I'm making this up, right? You know, you often hear me say,
"You're not making that up." That happens
you
all the time.
often think that the C in CIO stands for conference rooms anyway. We get enough noise out of that stuff, right?
That's good.
But what I find is that if you look at the data,
it's true.
If you look at the data, right? You know, and I look at we look at this from an operational metric perspective, just data that shows that, you know, on an average basis, we have 3 million minutes per month of conference room usage across the company in terms of how much is going on. And then the only thing you hear are these sort of 3 squeaky complaints. It's like, you know, it makes me feel like, okay, if that's all we're getting, versus let's not over rotate and go figure out how we spend a tremendous amount of time solving the problem for 3 people that had some bad experience. You know, I often get this, the quality of service on this particular thing was terrible. And you look underneath the covers and you're like, well, yeah, that's because at the time of this meeting, you were in your car in a tunnel on a 3G network. And yeah, you're going to get poor QoS. You have to, there's a lot of things you can use data for today. We get a lot of forensics and data that allow us to make sure that we're not, you know, catering for a minority versus the majority.
You know, I went through Paul has a great phrase that he uses, which is, to be a successful IT executive, you have to become comfortable at being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that is so true. So I went through a reorganization once where I had a new reporting relationship to another C-level executive. And his first question was, so do you have a happy customer? Like, is there somebody I can go talk to who's just like elated at IT and like you're satisfying all their needs and they're like totally happy?
Everyone, Mark.
So I said, well, there's nobody like that. That doesn't. People can always find problems with what they're not getting.
Yeah.
It could be their administrative assistant who is having a calendaring problem, all the way to there could be people that are suffering from, much more severe password. Well, but not that password lockout is a huge problem. But I mean, there's all kinds of noise that comes through the system all the time. And if you take all that personally and you think you are personally responsible for keeping the 10,000 people happy or the 1,500 people happy, you don't want this job. I mean, this is not the job for you whatsoever.
Yeah, you'll be in a fetal position sucking your thumb in the corner.
All right. I get a game if you guys want to play a game.
A game?
Yeah. You guys want to play a game?
Are you getting 2 podcasts out of this? Like, you're going to just milk this?
Oh, yeah. You ready?
No.
Okay. So each person, so you have a buzzer. You just have to say the word
Is
ding.
this the buzzer?
No, you just say ding.
Ding.
Like ding, whatever. So
You need to
I'm
come
gonna
up with the
I'm gonna
buzzers on
read a
this table.
quote. I'm gonna read a quote, and it's gonna be one from one of the 3 of you that you've actually said.
Oh, God.
Oh, shit.
And so when you ding in,
Oh my God, this is so easy.
when you ding in, you have to say who the person it is who said the quote, but you can't ding in on yourself, right?
Yeah,
so
you're
otherwise,
crazy.
So and then you get a point for each
What are
one that
you
you get
doing on
right.
that laptop?
Hey, don't worry about it. Are we ready? So you
No,
gotta-
there's no slamming.
No,
There's
it's
no-
not slamming. It's a ding.
Okay.
It's a ding verbally.
Oh, okay. Verbal.
All right. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Innovation should be a team sport. The whole management team should know what all the balls are that we are juggling, that we are moving from stage to stage.
Did someone say that today?
Qualify the rules. Is that today's podcast?
No, these are previous quotes.
That one of us 3 said in a previous.
That one of you have said this or
I have
quoted
never
it.
said that.
That's a Mark Settle. That's a Mark
That's
Settle.
correct.
definitely-
It is Mark.
Oh!
That's
nice
nice job.
job. Innovation is a team sport.
I agree. It's a great quote. It's a great quote.
Yeah,
You don't
but-
send
Oh,
like
are
2
we-
people in E8 off to figure out what's going to happen in the
Yeah, but all we're talking about is collaboration and productivity. We're not talking about innovation.
But that was great. That was a great quote.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You got to
ready.
read the book. Like
Number 2. You got to
Yeah.
read the book. The guy's an author.
Okay, yeah. Trust me, I read the book.
All right.
My whole team's read the book.
Well, that was the test. I mean, you fail the test, you have to reread it.
Okay. Ready. Number 2. Every CEO of a thriving company should be ensuring that they have the right technology expertise in-house to ensure that they're able to meet their growth strategies.
That's an Alvina comment.
That is correct. 2 points.
Man, Paul, that's wrong.
That's 2
That's
points.
all right.
I had to think about
I
that.
know my friends and family.
Strategies, yes. That's what we should be talking about.
Expertise in-house. I like it though. That's good
Yeah.
stuff. Okay. Number 4. You ready?
Number 3, you only on 2.
Oh, sorry. Number 3. Number 3. I was getting ahead of myself. Number 3.
2 for
And
0.
we're drinking. He's
Jeez.
Okay. Number 3. The CIO leader needs to be a visionary, just as much as the product leader needs to be a visionary and the marketing leader needs to be a visionary. Technology requires vision.
Ding, Paul.
It was Alvina.
Yeah. That was
Take
not me.
that from me.
-1 point. This is like it's like
You get
around the horn.
negatives?
Yeah, you get negative.
It
It's like
wasn't
around the
cheesy
horn.
enough to be me.
It wasn't cheesy enough. 2 high
Okay.
fives.
Ready? Next one.
Wait a minute. Where's that quote from? Where'd you say
I
that?
have no idea.
Okay.
I think you said it. I think you probably said it on IT Visionaries
I don't
podcast.
know.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that's
She
Shout out to
knows
our-
us too well.
Shout out to Hillary for the great prep on this, and Aaron, both of our producers. Next one. Today's employees' productivity depends on technology seamlessly empowering their changing workplace environment. And it's critical to remove friction, not only to attract and motivate staff, but also retain them.
Ding!
We had 2 fingers pointing at Paul. That's correct. I'll give you both a point.
Mr. Paul Chapman.
That was it. That's the game.
Oh, that's it. Oh, well, I won.
Yeah, 2 points.
It's all about
1
the
and
winning.
0.
It's not the taking part. It's about the winning.
Exactly.
You want, I mean, I could try to find more.
So I'm at -1, and what did they get?
No, you're back. You're even. He
got
Paul
2.
won, yeah.
Paul won.
And for that, you get an extra. Yeah, we'll send you,
You get invited
away
back.
with a
We're not
variety
going to
pack.
come back.
Variety pack.
grab a Newcastle Brown Ale before I step out.
Nice.
So should we do some lightning round?
Oh,
Love
And
it.
this thing? All right. We've already asked you all the lightning round questions, all 3. But actually, here's a little trivia for the 2 gents. Alvina, you have to abstain. You can fire in. Alvina was one of the first guests of IT Visionary. What guest number was she?
3.
I was going to go with 3. 5.
Number 2.
2.
Yeah. Mark was episode 16 and Paul was 21. Okay, so lightning round.
So, question for you: what's better, one-on-one or having the 3 of us
Oh, this is great. I mean, we should do this. I
every
don't
2
know.
weeks?
Yeah, every 2. Yeah, I was just gonna say.
After I found out I was 21 and Alvina was 3, I'm not showing up again. I'm sorry. That was not a motivating number for me.
Okay, yeah. So lightning round. You've already had the first batch of lightning rounds, so these are going to be different. And we'll just go around the horn. We'll start with the person who got last place, 0 points.
Negative
Mark.
1.
Negative.
What do you
Mark
mean?
was negative.
-1.
No, he came back to because you both pointed at the
Oh,
same time,
right,
so I'm giving you
right,
credit for the
right.
points, even
Thank
though
you. I
nobody
appreciate
said
that.
nobody used their buzzer. Nobody said ding. So, what is your favorite fake bit of technology from like a movie, a book, TV show that you wish was real?
Teleportation, right? Like where you stand someplace and like you get taken to some place that's like 9,000. Because there are restaurants in New York that I would love to go to during the week, but I just can't get there. Like in the short
Elon's working on it. Fake bit of
I
tech.
feel better about
Alvina?
that. Well, actually, no, I don't feel better about that.
Fake bit of tech.
Yeah, that you wish was real.
Can I pass to Paul?
You can pass.
Well, actually, I was actually thinking of the fly and the teletransportation, but then you're right that the hyperloop and what the promise of is happening there.
The fly and the telly. Wait, what?
No, you remember the movie The Fly, the teletransportation?
yeah.
I was thinking, that would be, you said
I'm thinking
movie.
like, I
you
was
said
thinking
movie.
like Star Trek and stuff.
Yeah, you said, beam me up, Scotty, sort of. Yeah, I mean, there's always the beam me
I
up.
thought you were going with I thought you were saying like British, like the telly.
No. Teleporter. No, not that as in the television. Yes.
Television.
Yeah, this is a tricky one because there's so many things. I'm just trying to think back over all the different movie things, but I think the one where you get the chip that's implanted in the stem and you end up sort of having like what they call it like instant Google in sort of implanted, so your access to knowledge is like instant. That seems like I feel like that would be good, and then I realized no, that would not be good.
Yeah, that's right.
So
it's too Black Mirror.
Yeah.
I think many of our teenage children, if they could have a chip somewhere like implanted in their skull where they could like telepathically communicate with their friends, they would line up at the mall and just have that.
Yeah, I want to do the reverse. Can we have the reverse? Like, can we like figure out a future where we don't have our phones and
What tech can we remove?
What can we remove? It's like I want to be on the island, the beach at the island with no tech. How's that?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, mine is more real as I thought about it. It's more, we deal with so many SaaS solutions. I wish I could just make them all talk to each other.
Oh,
They all have different languages. They all have different.
That wasn't in a movie though.
It wasn't in a movie.
That would be a boring movie. We
It
have a
would-
movie about high-tech SaaS solutions talking to each other. It's
Hey,
like,
the mission will do it.
It would be magical.
You guys pay for it. We'll
I
write
pay
it.
for
We'll
it.
write the script.
There is a conversation here somewhere, maybe in the future, about how technology disintermediates human interaction. So even my own family, I have kids that are in their late 20s. When they come home at Christmas, we can sit in front of the TV and everybody's on at least 2 different devices.
Oh,
in
yeah.
addition to the TV being on. This is like our once a year family like reunion or whatever. And I'm always reminded of a good friend I have who has a ski place in Taos. And so he tells a story like he goes up there and it's not uncommon for a big storm to come in which they'll lose all power. The batteries will go off on the laptops and the phones and everything else. And so when this happens, they actually pull out like board games and they actually start talking to each other and interacting as a family unit, And so I told, his name is Ian as well. I said, well, what happens like when the power comes back? He says, oh, it only takes about like an hour and we're all back to like being in our own closed electronic worlds. It's like the Matrix,
It's interesting. The environment is very indicative of the behavior, because we had a cabin up in the Sierra Mountains for 10 plus years. And when the kids were younger, we used to go up there pretty almost every weekend. And their persona completely changed. It was family time, jigsaw puzzles, helping out in the kitchen, because we didn't have internet there. We didn't have connectivity on cellular phone. And it wasn't like it was like this crazy withdrawal thing. It was just they changed their persona. And it was actually very refreshing. I think the environment is indicative of the behavior in this situation.
This is a request for product. I figured it out. You ready? So there's a device. We'll call it like, I don't know, tentatively titled Mommy and Daddy Wi-Fi Killer. So it's a thing that you put in your pocket or you have on your phone, and it's like a 100-yard perimeter that cuts Wi-Fi, but like you pretend like, well, we're just in the mountains, like we just must not get Wi-Fi. I don't know. And so it's like everybody thinks that there's no Wi-Fi, but in reality, you're just like killing it all. You're killing like all the LTE. And so it's like you're pretending like it's like we must just be so remote. I don't know. And then they're like, well, in town we get it. And then they're probably gonna like go in town and sneak off to the bathroom and like text their friends.
One of my product fantasies was when I have a daughter who's in her late 20s now, but when she was in high school, she was 24/7 on her cell phone. Like anybody could call her for therapy or empathy. Empathy is a better word. Like if they had to vent about their parents or their boyfriend or their best friend that had done
She's
something.
the good listener.
She was the good listener. Okay.
Great American.
And I also, at the time I thought, I actually would pay Verizon more to turn off the phone. I would pay for a suspension of service. So I'm buying service now. I would pay a premium for suspension of service between like 10 p.m. and maybe 6 a.m.
They would gladly accept your money, I'm
right,
sure.
Like we'll pay.
At least during dinner time.
So
that's the place. So that's Verizon can just do it.
Right.
They can just suspension of. It's like when you go abroad. You're like, oh, I'm traveling abroad. It's like, hey, I'm going to the mountains. Cut the family plan.
But
off.
if you not experienced this of late, so if I book a dinner reservation on OpenTable, okay, and it puts the appointment in your calendar. And when you sit down for dinner, I don't know if it's which iOS version it sort of figured this out. It actually says, do you want to put they have the, it's like the sleep time where it's like, okay, between the hours of 11 and 6, only the people in your VIP list can contact you. Otherwise, everything else goes to voicemail or whatever. So that happens now. It says, do you want me to basically turn your phone into do not disturb? Do not disturb.
Yeah,
That's
there
right.
you
Do
go.
not disturb. Do not disturb 7 till 8:30 p.m. And you say yes, and your phone goes into do not
So
disturb.
because we can't control ourselves,
Yeah, I know.
and because we have no diligence around what quality time is with family, we're asking for the
my
for the
digital
vendors.
I'm just
assistant.
asking the great CIO in the sky to answer my problems.
No, my
That's all
digital
I'm asking.
assistant will tell me.
Force me.
Do you want me to? This is digital assistance, right?
Paul, are we just whinging? Like, what's going on?
No, I was at a meeting where a speaker, it was a symposium kind of thing. It was the morning keynoter said, how many people looked at their cell phone before they left the house today? So, of course, 100%, right? This is like an IT meeting. And he said, how many people kissed their spouse before they left the house today? 3% of the people in the audience, had
That's
like
sad.
any
Not
like
great.
physical
That's sad.
contact with their spouse, like their thing. But that's the way we are. And a follow-on story is,
Not me, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm 100% on both.
Becky's
The
listening
order
right
I can't
now,
guarantee,
so.
but the 100% on
good for
both.
you. Good for you. So my master's advisor, when I was in school, he told us he went to William and Mary down in Virginia, and before he'd go to sleep in the dorm, he was a smoker, and he would take a cigarette out and leave it horizontal on the night table next to the bed, so that in the morning when he rolled over, he could light the cigarette before he had to sit up. So horizontally, first thing in the morning, lit a cigarette. That was the way he started his day. And when he told us this, we thought, oh my God, like this, that's like a Neanderthal thing. Like, how could you possibly, and that's an addictive, like how many people like lay there, the cell phone's there, and they like pull a cell phone. The first thing you're doing in the morning is like looking at the messages. That
Harvard actually has an HBR book. It's called Sleeping with Your Cell Phone. They've written a book on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Nir Eyal wrote the book Hooked, And that was one of the things, and he gave a really good talk about it, where he was like, they have basically like Wi-Fi shuts off at 10 p.m. every night in his house. And he's like have to do it. And then so the other thing is like putting your cell phone in the other room. I mean, I have to put it like out of sight, otherwise, because like the sight of it triggers you, right? Like if you put your like work laptop, it's like you probably are all triggered by the fact that I have my laptop up while we're working, or while we're not working. Yeah, it is. I mean, it literally is distracting when someone is on their phone, even if they're taking notes for like a good cause. It's super distracting because you're like, but what are they doing? What are they really doing? Are they on something else? So, yeah, it's tough.
We can have a whole topic on that.
I'm going to tell personal stories. This is a discussion with my wife. Okay, so like we're going to go deep dive here. So I've been in the car with her, and one time I commented, I said, it's really amazing to me how you can take a call in the car and suddenly you transform into a completely different person. Like we can be sitting there in stone silence, or have had a minor disagreement or whatever, and suddenly somebody calls and you're like the most hospitable, loquacious person, like it's just the good times are rolling, on this call. So it's just amazing to me how you can like switch. She said, you should look at yourself reading email. Your facial expressions when you sit at the kitchen table and you look at email change dynamically from one email to another. You are like 10 different personalities as you read the email. And so I shut up after that and I stopped talking because I suspected that she was probably right. I mean, we're so close to the matrix that it's not even funny. I mean, we are really right on the verge of that.
I mean, for me, who has 3 young children, I mean, my twin boys are 9 and my daughter is 6. I could be present or think that I'm present physically, but I'm on my phone.
Yep.
And they're longing for true presence. They're longing for attention. And so that's something that, you have to walk away from. You have to be able to truly focus on being present at the time that you're with your children.
And imagine how that translates into authenticity in the workplace. I mean, it's easy to talk about families, and we all have families to deal with, but that's what all our direct reports are looking for when they come in and have a 2-minute conversation, a 1-hour conversation, or a 2-hour review in a big room of people. They just want us to be authentic with them and present.
Yeah, totally. It's like being on time and all that sort of stuff, where you're just like, you can make an excuse of like, hey, I was with a customer. Customers come first, but you're like, yeah, but you're still 5 minutes late.
Right. Respect the time.
Yeah, that's it. How do we do, everyone?
I have to do it again because it's like we barely scratched the surface.
We barely scratched the surface. We're gonna have to have CIO Roundtable number 3 coming to a podcast near you. Thanks everyone for hanging out. This is great. Thanks to all of our listeners. If you have any questions for our CIO Roundtable, just tweet at the Mission HQ and we'll make sure we get it to them. Thanks again.
Thank you again to our friends at Salesforce. IT Visionaries is brought to you by the Lightning Platform by Salesforce. Salesforce just introduced the Lightning Platform Mobile, the low-code mobile app development platform that empowers anyone to easily build, publish, and manage AI-powered mobile apps for employees and for customers. Find out more at salesforce.com/buildmobileapps.